Y'all ready? Bow with me, please. Gracious Heavenly Father, here we are again asking you to forgive us, knowing that we're imperfect in every way. Lead us and guide us. Let us do things that are pleasing in your sight. Hold our hands. I ask these things in my Savior's name. Amen. Okay. We're just thrilled to have the Appropriations Chairman, Mr. Terry England, to come and explain some bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. England, you're on.
Members of the committee, good to be with you all this morning. We've got a small little housekeeping bill we'd like to propose to you. House Bill 76, otherwise known as the state budget. Starting July 1 of 2015, running through June 30th of 2016. That is my request, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have any questions of the chairman? Thank you. You don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Hitchens.
On the back page, under modified structure, about two-thirds of the way down, House Bill 325. This is a bill I've been working on for 3 years now. I got it over to the Senate 2 years ago and had it to the floor, got it tabled. Worked on it last year, couldn't get it through rules. Essentially what it is, a definition, it changes the definition of motor vehicle, passenger vehicles from 10 passenger to 15. It's an agency bill for the Department of Public Safety that'll require 15 passenger van passengers to wear seatbelts.
Any questions? Thank you. Oh, wait a minute. 25.
I was just going to ask, does it do anything with slowpoke drivers? No.
I thought he already took care of all the slowpokes, except for those that get in front of me on the way home. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Everybody get comfortable. Mr. Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hope your foot's doing better. I've got.
He's going to get a bill today. He's been nice.
I've got a couple I'd like to mention to you, Mr. Chairman. The first one is HB 71. It's on the back of the page under modified structure. Fourth one down. I'm sorry. This is, in my opinion, a major piece of legislation, Mr. Chairman, that I've worked on for several months relating to the Pardon and Parole Board and increasing transparency of an operation that's been hid behind a veil of secrecy for 70 years. I've worked closely with Chairman Golick and others in the chamber, including the Pardon and Parole Bill, to get them to the point to where they were, it was a compromise. But I feel like it changes the Pardon and Parole Board, involves public trust, and I would ask that you consider HB 71 for the floor, Mr. Chairman.
Have any questions on 71? No question. Next one.
The next one I'd like to mention would be dealing with HB 118, Mr. Chairman. That's also under modified structure, just a couple down from 71. This is the federal cleanup bill that's required by federal regulations. It does quite a few things. I'd be happy to go through any of them that anyone wants to talk about. It was talked about extensively in committee, but it's a federal cleanup bill that's required for us to continue to get the federal highway money, Mr. Chairman.
That was 118?
Yes.
No questions.
Mr. Chairman, I do have another one on there. I'm happy to answer any questions on 114, but I will tell you I'm still working with Chairman Willard and Chairman Earhart on that bill, so I would ask that you allow me to come back at another time when we work through that a little further.
That's the one I was going to give you all morning on.
I'm happy to take it, Mr. Chairman, but I'm not sure that we're there.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Caldwell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. If all it takes is being nice, I want to make sure to tell how nice all of you look today. I bring to you the fifth bill up on page 1 from the bottom, House Bill 252. This is the J. Calvin Hill Jr. Act. It was passed last year out of the House unanimously by Representative Welch. The Code Revision Committee asked me to carry it this year. It's 23 pages of repeal of old code that isn't used. 65 different agencies and departments emailed the committee with different pieces of law they wanted removed. So that's all this is. It's a beautiful repeal bill. We have passed it unanimously out of the House before, and I'd ask for your consideration to do the same again. Thank you very much.
No question, and apparently you can't see the same people I see when I look out there.
Whatever you say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of this committee. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak about House Bill 362. And this important bill allows physicians to prescribe inhalers to the school rather than just to the student. It can go to the school, and trained school personnel are able to use these inhalers if a child has an asthma attack.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Belt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you House Bill 103. It's the fourth one down on the modified open rule. This is actually the third year we've been working on this bill with Representative Pam Dickerson, Representative Doug Holt, and then myself. Basically says that you are not allowed to put a minor's personal information like telephone number on a pornographic website. I've worked very closely with the prosecutors, attorneys, counsel, and they're very happy with this, and I hope you'll get your favorable consideration.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify, this is your first trip to the Rules Committee, but I thought I heard you say that we have been working on this for the last 3 years.
The Representative Pam Dickerson, Representative Doug Holt, and then myself.
So you worked on this 2 years before you arrived?
No, sir.
Okay, so when I heard we've been working on this for the last 3 years, that's what I would interpret that. So I'm just trying to find out who really gets the credit for the last 3 years.
I guess I'll give it to Representative Doug Holt and Pam Dickerson.
Thank you.
No more questions. Ms. Baskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. First, I need to say that I, too, hope that Mr. Chairman's foot is doing better today. And I'm here today for two bills. House Bill 207 under modified open rule, halfway down, regarding judicial disqualification. It provides that certain people, judges, judicial officers, trial judges, and grand jurors will be disqualified if they are related within the third degree of consanguinity to a party at interest in the matter. It decreases the pool of people who are automatically disqualified from serving, but of course everyone else can be challenged for cause. My second bill is House Bill 297 under open rule. Well, let me pause and ask if there are any questions, Mr. Chairman, about House Bill 207.
Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain the effect of what 207 does? So in essence, someone be more closely related to somebody and still not be disqualified? Is that the effect?
No. sorry. What House Bill 207 does is provide for automatic disqualification to serve if you're related within the third degree of consanguinity, which means aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and everybody closer. Your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. Everybody further than that out can be disqualified. Not disqualified, can be challenged and prohibited from serving for cause if you in fact do have a close relationship to that person or an interest in the outcome of the case.
In existing law today would be what kind of separation?
It is the 6th degree of separation, and that's been according to statute from 1935 until now, but from 72 to 2011, the Georgia Code of Judicial Conduct said 3rd degree. That's how the courts operated. It is putting our statute in conformity with the American Bar Association Model Code of Judicial Conduct and that of most of our surrounding states.
Thank you.
Ms. Dempsey? Is it Mr. Peake?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think but you may just want to confirm again so that us that have never heard that word, what that refers to. Consanguinity.
Thank you, Representative Peake. I know that's a 5-letter word, so that may be difficult. 5-syllable word, so that may be difficult for some
Auburn graduates,
people.
yeah, it's a difficult thing to grasp. We don't come across those words in Auburn, Alabama very often. So.
And did you bring up the great state of Alabama?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm not going to make the joke, but we've all heard the Jeff Foxworthy's comment on Alabama, haven't we? He said, I didn't suggest, you could be from Alabama if your family tree doesn't branch. I'm just repeating. I'm not saying.
You sure you want to ask a question? You'll like this one.
Okay. If I have somebody in here with the press, they better forget that statement. We're having a hard enough time with water. I don't need that out there. Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Chairman, kind of going along the same lines, I'm kind of concerned we won't be able to have a jury in Irwin County if this bill passes. I apologize, Mr. Chairman.
It is blatantly apparent that I have lost what little control over this group. Next bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My next bill is House Bill 297 under open rule, and it relates to professional licensing boards and allows a state licensing board to delegate or contract with the National Association of Boards for the purposes of processing its state licensing exam applications. Not its licensing applications, but its exam applications. And this was brought at the request of the Architects Board, but would apply to all the boards that come under that statute.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. I appreciate it.
Mr. Spencer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. I asked for House Bill 18. That's the exemption of state licensure for aerospace engineer. That's a jobs bill. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take those now.
No questions. You got another one?
I have a second bill, sir. That's House Bill 69. That's the Motor Vehicle Event Data Recorder Act. Succinctly, this is a privacy bill. The National Highway Safety Board has essentially made a regulation to provide that all cars now have these event data monitors, or also known as black boxes in vehicles. But the problem is they have not set a national standard as to who owns the information in those event data recorders. So 15 states have already defined who actually owns that data, which is the owner of the vehicle. And I essentially model this legislation after some of these states have already implemented, and that's essentially what it does.
Any questions? Yes. Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Spencer, how does this relate to GPSs already in trucks? I know we don't call them black boxes, but how does this correlate with?
Well, specifically, GPS data is not defined as what the data is in the event data recorder, but there are applications out there that can capture some of this data that I have enumerated in this bill. So I didn't specifically enumerate GPS applications, but it is possible that applications like that could capture this data, hence the need for the reason why I think we need this bill to protect the owner's information.
Further question. The employer does monitor speed, so you've got in here vehicle speed.
Speed, right.
So
that's
what are you telling me?
Mainly for crash data. When they are when companies want to determine what happened in a crash, we provide a provision for that here in the bill to let them have access to that data on the consent of the owner. So yes, speed is part of that data.
But further question, Mr. Chairman, employers monitor speed on truck drivers.
Correct.
So you're telling me?
Well, if they own the vehicle,
yes.
If they own the vehicle themselves, it is their data, the individual's data that owns the vehicle. Their concern did come up in committee, which I do plan to address regarding lessees and lessors. If a lessor is essentially the owner of the vehicle, then they would have some right to the data, and I will make a correction in that provision that we discussed in committee.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure about this.
Mr. Smith.
Just a quick question for you. Are there any reciprocal agreements with other states? Because if you're in an accident in another state, do you still own that information, or what happens then?
The premise under this bill is that the owner owns that information, and if there's any agreements between subscription services or in the case of an investigation, there's provisions in the bill that allows access for that data, whether that be a court order or a request from an insurance company or a request, but that would have to do under consent of the owner.
Okay.
No more questions. Thank you. Got any more?
That's it. Thank you.
Right. Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here today on the modified structure, back page, House Bill 184. It's the annual housekeeping bill for the Department of Banking and Finance. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Bruce.
Good morning. Back, hopefully third time is the charm. House Bill 89, trying to clean up the drug and prostitution in the some of the areas of my county. And what this bill does is just changes the date to allow all of those areas that were designated by local government to be drug-free zones, to just extend it to include those other areas that came after the last time this was modified. That's it.
Any questions, Mr. Bruce?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. T. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Bring before you today under modified open rule, about halfway down, HB 210. This bill brought from the Department of Driver Services. Basically what this bill does is allow people, when applying for a state identification card, to take advantage of checking off the blindness, to contribute $1 to blindness, and also to take advantage of the organ donor program. We currently have both of these in driver's licenses, but we don't have them for state ID cards.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Lumsden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Come before you today to ask for House Bill 99, which is on page 1 under modified open rule, third item down. I presented this to you on Monday. This provides for tenancy in common as a default condition in certain divorce situations. Also, House Bill 338, page 1, modified open rule, third from the bottom. This bill provides a funding mechanism, a local funding mechanism for the electronic citation system. I bring these before you, and I ask for that you would move these bills. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Kurt, is this the third time?
Yes, sir. This is the third time. And may I say you look mighty dapper today in a gray suit and a blue shirt. The foot had already been mentioned, Mr. Chair.
May I say that there ain't no reason for you to come back?
Okay. Senate Bill 53 is on page 1 at the bottom. It's the only one that starts with an S. I'm asking for your favorable consideration for that bill to be released from rules, and it simply extends the sunset clause on Senate Bill 65 that passed last year, which that clause ends March 15th of this year, and it will extend it through June 30th of 2018.
Who's going to carry that bill for you in the House?
Miss Representative Clark.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Kurt? You're done.
Thank you.
Mr. Peake.
No. Bring before you HB 1. It's on the second page, top of the page, modified structured rule. This is Haley's Hope Act. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, so I won't bore you with too many details, but basically will allow immunity for possession of cannabis oil with a maximum amount of 5% of THC for a certain amount of qualifying conditions. It also would create the Georgia Commission on Medical Cannabis as well, too. We have two amendments, Mr. Chairman. I'll be more than glad to kind of walk through those if you'd like me to at the appropriate time.
Now's the time.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. First one is AM 292358. This amendment was discussed in committee, and Chairman Golick felt like we shouldn't, it just needed some technical changes and felt like we shouldn't make it on the fly, but actually present it before the Rules Committee, and we've done that, and basically just providing some protection for hospitals and medical professionals who would possibly treat an individual or a citizen who has in their possession medical cannabis oil. The intent was we want to make sure that a citizen or individual who went to a hospital was in possession of cannabis oil legally per state law would not be turned away at a hospital setting because of their possession of the cannabis oil. This has been an agreement between CHOA, the Hospital Association, and the trial lawyers as well too. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would ask for the favorable consideration of that amendment. I'm glad to answer questions or go on to the second one, whichever your preference.
Do the next one.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, AM 292360 is simply adding, we have 8 medical conditions that would be qualified for access to cannabis oil under the bill. We are adding one more, sickle cell disease. We had a lot of discussion yesterday with significant members of our body who felt that this was an important issue to include in the list of qualifying conditions. We've actually had significant amount of input from the Sickle Cell Foundation of Georgia, who has been lobbying hard for inclusion of this condition as well too. And so I'm in support of this amendment, and that's the purpose of adding the condition.
Mr. Ramsey.
Representative Peake, I'm going to support this amendment, but I'm just curious. I know we've got a lot of anecdotal data on the benefits to seizure disorder, for instance. Do we have that same kind of anecdotal data on sickle cell?
There is sickle cell. Again, I'm not an expert on it, but and someone else maybe can provide a little more information. But it causes a significant amount of pain. That's what it's associated with, and so.
So there are people out in the country that's using
that have seen a significant benefit.
Okay.
A lot of the sickle cell cases are in the South and in the Georgia, where there's not a lot of access to cannabis oil so far. So it's very limited data, but it's clear that the same positive impacts that you would see for someone with fibromyalgia or mitochondrial disease, which is a highly painful disease, would see the same benefits for someone who has sickle cell.
Thanks. Good amendment, good bill.
Thank you.
Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a follow-up to the Majority Whip's question, the real anchor of the bill, I think, in talking about have we seen that kind of particular condition have be affected positively by the use of the cannabis oil. The real anchor of the bill, as I see it, and another gentleman will talk to it on the floor, is the fact that an individual will not receive the card which will allow them to have possession from DPH unless they've gotten certain certification from their treating physician, not just any physician, their treating physician, so that while some of this, if not a lot of it, candidly, may be anecdotal, largely anecdotal, many people having been affected, not just a small number, over the course of a broad spectrum of conditions, it still goes back to, ultimately it goes back to the physician. So what we're doing is really positioning those individuals, if their treating physician thinks that they could benefit by it, and they may not, but if their treating physician believes that this is something that's good for them, then they'll go ahead and allow for the certification, which allows for the card, which allows for the treatment. So, and that applies to any condition that's on the list.
That's correct.
But that's
yes,
really, I think, the strength of it, and that goes to the Majority Whip's question about what have we seen.
Yes, sir, Chairman Golick, and I'm grateful to you for helping us perfect that. We kept that doctor-patient relationship at the core of the bill, the approval process for that, and you're exactly right. That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Benton, you got a question on this? Okay. All right. I tell you what, let's do. Let's take, again, the amendment comes here. You're approving it to go on to the floor. Okay? You're not approving the amendment. You're approving it to go on the floor and let it be voted on. AM 292358, amendment by Mr. Peak. I hear a second.
Second.
Any opposition? It's on. All right. Amendment AM 292360, Peak, Golick, and Abrams. Any opposition? All right. Those are on. All right. I'm gonna stop right here for a second. I'm going to set a supplemental calendar for today. SB 53. Any opposition? It's on for today. HB 1. Any opposition? It's on. All right. Mr. Earhart.
Be appropriate to make a motion to limit the debate on this. I think this is a very.
We will.
Representative Peak has done such a great job. We just don't need to take 3 hours on it.
Mr. Golick will do that later on.
I just reminded him.
Okay. All right. Who have I got next? Hey, Tom Dixon, how you feeling? Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to, on the first page under modified open rule, I would like to ask for House Bill 394. Last year we put the Professional Nursing Board and the LPN Board together. This is from the Secretary of State. Some things were left out, like the board's ability to enforce disciplinary actions against the LPNs. This is a cleanup bill, and I would ask that it be also moved to modified structure. And on the second page under modified structure, I once again like to ask for House Bill 195, the biosimilar bill. And I'd like to put my name by, under the open rule, House 297, so we don't have to go through the Alabama discussion again. So, thank you. We might go to Tennessee next, and that would be really bad.
We'll get somebody else next. Mr. Benton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 51, first one under modified open, has to do with the redemption of property and the payment of homeowners association dues.
Mr. Benton, I want you to go in depth on that one just a little bit more, so that there's about 5 of us up here that needs to listen to this one. I'm still confused.
Okay. Right now, if you go and buy property at a tax sale, and there is a homeowners association involved in the property, you're going to get a bill from them for the dues. Well, technically for 12 months you can't go on that property. You can't do any improvements. You're trespassing if you do, but you're still required to pay those homeowners association dues. Well, if you end up with a property, then there's no problem, but in a lot of cases that property is redeemed by the previous owner, in which they pay the taxes plus a penalty, but you don't get your homeowners association dues back. And this bill solves that problem. You would get your money back plus 20% that you paid.
Mr. Ramsey.
Chairman Benton, basically the goal of the bill is to encourage the payment of the HOA dues by the person that's holding the tax deed during that time period. Is that
you have to pay it. There's no, by Georgia statute, you have to pay that, but you can't get that back if the property is redeemed.
But what this will do is in addition to getting the tax the tax sale price plus the 20%, you're going to get your HOA fee. You'll
get your HOA
plus the 20%.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Stevens.
Wanted to put my name beside Representative Hitchens' House Bill 325, Representative Clark's House Bill 362, the inhaler bill, and Representative Cooper's 394.
Ms. Abrams.
I'd like to ask that the Rules Committee consider HB 89, which would expand the drug-free commercial zones to cover existing communities that really need this help.
Ms. Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like for the committee to consider Mr. Mitchell's foreclosure bill, House Bill 115.
Mr. Smyrie.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask, and that named House Bill 89 as well. Thank you.
Mr. A. Powell.
I'd like to ask for House Bill 192. Brought this up last week. This sort of sets parameters for local governments, city, county, school boards about the use of P cards and credit cards for their personal expenses. This sets the parameters that they have to pass by local ordinance, a process that states what they will do. The question that came up last week about the need for an amendment, and the amendment was brought to the committee first of the week. It clarified that said that city, county, or school official had to sign an agreement with the county.
Mr. Williams.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to put my name beside HB 89, HB 213, and HB 214.
Anyone else? All right, never mind, wait a minute. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, that non-controversial election bill, House Bill 194.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that the Rules Committee limit debate on HB 1, which is set on the supplemental for today, to no more debate for no more than an hour, inclusive of the author's initial 20 minutes, which of course he's under no duty to take completely.
Any opposed to that? Mr. Rogers. C. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, I want to, if you'll hold House Bill 69, I want to get with Representative Spencer to make sure I understand what he's doing on that, please.
Okay, we're going to set, this is for Thursday at whatever time of the day we get to come over here. Under modified open, HB 76. Anybody want to make? Thank you. Thank you. Is anybody opposed to hearing the budget tomorrow? If you are no longer on this committee. Okay. Under modified open, HB 207. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified open, HB 210. Any opposition? Its own. Under modified structure, HB 71. Move. Any opposition? Its own. Modified structure, HB 118. Any opposition? Its own. Modified structure, HB 184. Move. Any opposition? Modified structure, HB 192, and there will be the amendment on the table. Any opposition? It's modified structure, HB 325. Any opposition? It's modified structure, HB 362. Move. Any opposition? That'll give you a full afternoon. I thought we did. Y'all bear with me for a second. Bear with me for a second. I'm asking, did we move on the limiting of the time? Yes, we did. We said we're limited.